All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Heavy Metal History Podcast, I would like to welcome Taylor Danley to the podcast. He is a YouTuber, also has a band called Sacrificer with past guest Jamie Hanks. Taylor, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So the thing that I always like to start with on this podcast, I would like to know about your personal heavy metal history. You know, those bands that you remember discovering, those records that you remember discovering that kind of like shaped you into where you're at now with your musical tastes and everything.
Sure. Okay. So wow, where do we start? Let's see. I first started playing guitar is probably not like the most popular answer, but the first like thing that really got me interested in guitar at all or like any sort of heavy music was actually Aerosmith. When I was
Okay.
very young in the 90s when Get a Grip came out. It's very into that. And then that kind of progressed over the years. Like I just started liking more and more aggressive music, more distortion things. I got into like grunge in the 90s. Um, I was always really into like the heavier bands like Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
Um, I really liked Candlebox. I feel like that's a band that doesn't get enough credit. It's a really good grunge band from that era. Um, and then kind of progressed from there. I went through like big Marilyn Manson phase when I was in high school.
Sure.
And say what you want about him as a person, but I think it's kind of undeniable that Antichrist Superstar is a heavy as fuck album. So can I cuss on this? We're good to
Absolutely.
cuss. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. Uh yeah, and so Antichrist Superstar, uh that changed a lot for me, like just as far as artistically too, because it's
Yeah.
like a whole experience. It wasn't just the music. Um, there's just the packaging, everything was just really transformative in a way, like the way I listened to music and consumed it. And then from there, I think I found Slipknot in the 2000s, like in the new metal phase. I listened to
Yep.
a lot of new metal up until that point, and Slipknot was kind of the band that they were new metal enough to be on MTV, but heavy enough to gateway into like the more extreme underground sort of music. And I think it's important to remember back at that time, the way that you kind of discovered music was either you had MTV, if you were lucky enough to have satellite or something, maybe you had Fuse or
Yep.
MTV2. There was an MTV2 rock channel, I think, for a while. That
Yeah, I
was like
believe so.
yeah, very, very short, brief time. But I mean, there wasn't as much opportunity to discover these underground bands like there is now. Um, so it was like either you had mainstream or you would search liner notes and you would find out like the bands that these guys came up with that were probably still underground.
Yeah.
And I feel like I that's kind of the way it went. I would listen to something on MTV, maybe something a little bit more mainstream, like was popular at that time, like maybe Power Man 5000, something like that, and then you go
Yeah.
through the
Yeah, that
liner
makes
notes
sense.
and you're like, oh, System of a Down, like what's that band? And then you go through the liner notes, and then the next thing you know, you're listening to like Taproot or something like that, something a little bit more obscure. But Slipknot was like the first band to actually break out in a big way that was like a direct gateway into like death metal and
Yeah.
underground music. And then from there, that was when like file sharing started actually becoming a thing, and you actually started having access to that. And then I remember probably the first two, extreme bands that I ever listened to that ever really like piqued my interest was Cannibal Corpse, Bloodthirst specifically, um, and then Cradle of Filth. Um, what's the name of that album? I can't remember the name of the album off the top of my head, but one of the Bittersweets to Succubi. That was
Okay. Yeah.
that one. So those two like really got me into extreme metal music, and then kind of from there it's just yeah, it's just something I kind of keep up with, and that's kind of what has informed my opinion since.
Yeah. It never leaves you once it sucks you in.
No,
uh,
it's you don't go back for sure.
Something I kind of want to touch on too, speaking of Slipknot, because we have somewhat similar trajectories there as far as like things we listen to, but back then too, there weren't a lot of bands using that gnarly drop tuning that they have, except for Carcass. But like, we wouldn't have really known about Carcass at that
Mhm.
time. When we were discovering Slipknot, it's like, who the fuck is Carcass?
Right.
But they played like that drop B, like, I mean, just dirty, dirty low tone, man.
Yeah. I mean, there was some new metal bands that were doing it, but it just wasn't
I mean,
like
Corn, obviously,
it,
yeah, because they had
exactly
seven strings. Yeah.
right. And they kind of and you had like Steve Vai before that, and
Hmm.
like guitar music, and there were definitely bands doing it, but yeah, it wasn't um it wasn't popularized in that way. I don't feel
Yeah.
like, you know.
No, nowadays that's like the standard. Nobody plays in like standard tuning barely anymore.
Yeah, if you play an E standard, it's like that's really outside the box now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, man, like a lot of those bands during that they're like the mid 90s and early 2000s, like there was still so much potential for like experimentation and growth that
Mhm.
like when you did have like a Slipknot or even Marilyn Manson, it was like, well, I've never heard anything like this before. Like what else is there like this out there? Or even Cradle
Mhm.
of Filth, that was a big game changer for me too. When I heard that, I was like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is this? Like,
Yeah.
I want more of this.
Yeah, exactly. And there's good things and bad things about like the way technology is developed and like the way that music is shared now. But one of the cool things about back then was bands sounded much more unique. Like there
Hmm.
were, I mean, I would just guess that there were far less bands actually putting out music back then. In a way for like people to actually consume it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure the tape trade was going pretty strong, but I just feel like now there's so many bands and there's so much access to music, and like it kind of like gels all these bands together, like
Hmm.
there's not saying that all bands sound the same, but there are a lot more bands that, like, if you like a band, chances are you can find a handful of other bands that sound just like them. and
Yes.
uh and back then, yeah, that, I mean, hearing Cradle of Filth was like, I've never heard anything like this.
No.
Hearing Slipknot, like, I've never heard anything like this. And I just think that it was a little bit more, it felt more unique, I guess, or it felt more it was like more surprising to
Yeah.
hear those sort of things. And yeah, and the Antichrist Superstar thing, it's like, I that record is really I don't know if that record could be made today, a but the fact that it was just like it was on a public, I mean, it was everywhere. Like that, it
Yes.
was, on MTV. It was like everyone was talking about it, good or bad. And it really was probably the first time that I ever can really remember looking at an album like a piece of art, like the whole package. The liner notes, the inside, the atmosphere of the album, the way the album's put together, the track listings, like it's something that I don't see as much of anymore. I'm sure it exists. I'm just not uh consuming music in the same way anymore. But uh it, you know, that's definitely something that I wish more bands did. I wish more bands
Yeah.
put effort into that. And I feel like maybe they don't, just because streaming is so prolific. It's like, oh, why? We just need an album cover. We don't need all this effort to go into the thing. But it's like I kind of miss that. You know?
Yeah, I would say back when I was like buying records a lot, um, for me, this is kind of dumb, but for me, a lot of times, like I would go into the store and I would just look at the album covers
Uh-huh.
themselves and be like, okay, that looks cool. Maybe we should buy that. And
Yes.
sometimes you get burned and you're like, this isn't what I wanted. And then other times
Yeah.
you're like pleasantly surprised, and like this
Totally.
fucking rules.
Yep. Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
it's a $20 gamble. People forget,
yeah,
it's like CDs cost $20 back then, man. It was like, going to the record store, CD shop, whatever, on a Friday, and it was like, I'm gonna spend $40 or $60 and get three albums, and hopefully one of them's good.
yeah,
That's kind of how it went back then. And like I said, there's pros and cons, the way music is distributed now, but that was it sucked when you got burned, but it made it feel that much better when you got something that really mattered to you.
That's true. And I'll tell you what, man, the really good records, especially back when like CDs, were a thing, uh, you know, I would play them so much they would get scratched and I would have to go buy a
Yeah,
new copy.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I'm probably responsible for buying at least 10 copies of Black Dahlia Murders Unhollowed because I listened to it so much in high school. Like,
Yep. Yeah, that definitely is the thing. Or you lose it, you'd leave it somewhere.
yep.
It's not like you just log back into your Spotify account from another device or something, right? Um, yeah, it's like I said, it is definitely a special thing. Is I'm really I feel fortunate that I got to consume music in that way. And I think
Yeah.
that's maybe people's appeal with vinyl now because it seems like that's people want that same experience and that's why vinyl is so popular now. That's the platform that they choose to have that experience with. Um it's like I said, pros and cons. I do like, it's very similar to going back to the record store and going through the metal albums. I actually prefer to listen to music on Apple Music
Yeah.
because you can go to the metal releases and you can see all of the new releases for that week in a way that's not like Spotify will show you some of that, but it feels like very curated. You know what I
It
mean? Like
is.
you'll look at it and it's like there's no way there's only 3 albums this week.
Yeah.
You're showing me an album in the new releases that came out 2 months ago. Like I'm not, you know, it just it's I don't like that. So I like going to Apple Music and seeing like the albums that came out this week. And then same thing, you kind of like go through the artwork, listen, like that's how I discover new music a lot of times. It's
Mhm.
just going through the new releases and then looking at the album art, I'll be like, oh, that's cool. Let me listen to that. But still, yeah, just not the same investment as forking over $20 for an album. Not the same commitment for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely very specific to your personal algorithm, I've noticed on Spotify, because
Mhm.
sometimes like there will be a band that I haven't listened to in a while, but I know they have something new coming out, but it won't show up in my new releases thing. I will
Yeah,
literally have to go to them on Spotify and be like, "Oh, this record's out now. Cool, let me listen to it."
yeah, you have to
And then
search for
like,
it specifically.
yeah, other times like it'll show a new release, but it actually came out like you said like 2 3 months ago, and I was like, "What? Why is this just now popping up in my new releases? It's been out for a while."
Right. Yeah, and even with Apple Music, you have to like menu dive to get there, you know what I mean? It's weird to me that there isn't a music service that has figured out that like, hey, there's people like to do this. People like to discover
Mhm.
new music in this way and to give you like an easier access to do that. Instead, they just want to like feed you the things that they think are going to keep you on the platform.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? It's like,
yeah, yeah,
and it's like I sometimes that's cool. Sometimes I will say the Spotify algorithm recommendation engine is like pretty good.
yeah.
Um, I'll finish listening to like a new release that came out or whatever, and then it'll recommend me something. I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. And I have found bands that way too, but it's like I want that experience though of seeing all of the things that came out and being able to like go through and pick them for myself. You know what I mean? There's
Yes.
something still valuable to that, I feel like.
Yeah, because like otherwise, the only way I either find out about stuff is like if somebody posts something new on Reddit or the YouTube, shows me like, hey, this band has something coming out, or this record label that I follow, like their new releases, and because like you said, like everything's digital, so like word of mouth doesn't really work anymore unless it's like some new band that people are posting about and they're getting attention, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that the new release algorithm's a little weird on Spotify for sure. And even then, like finding new bands on there, that's even harder, man.
Yeah.
Like it barely like I was actually noticing this the other night when I was doing research for like my history episodes. So
Mm-hmm.
like if you go and pick a band, say like Cannibal Corpse, for instance, whatever. And then you scroll down to like the similar artist page. Well, every similar artist that's in there is some well-known band.
Right.
I would like if they showed some like newer bands in there that are similar. Give me some like fresh meat in there, not incantation, suffocation. All the
Right.
stuff everybody already knows.
Yeah,
Um,
they're making safe bets.
yes, yeah,
And that's true. And I feel like, there needs to be like some setting or something on these streaming platforms where it's like,
that would
hey,
be a
I
good
want to
idea.
see everything. I want to see like the random band because that's how you discover cool music. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, I think that the barrier to entry, uh, to a more mainstream audience used to be record labels, and it used to be um A&R people, whatever.
Mhm.
There was definitely a system to get records noticed, radio, DJs, whatever. And now it's more like people that other people follow for their musical tastes.
Yep.
Those are the people that are like, now that's sort of like the gatekeeper, or the arbitrator, I guess, of the platform. And it's, yeah, there's something, I don't know. Yeah, there's something I definitely miss about like going to the store and just being able to shuffle through and just find that old dusty CD that like no one picked up because the cover art was offensive and they had to hide it in the back, and they had to put the sticker over it because like they had to like censor the gore on the front of the album or whatever it is. And you're like, that's what made you want to pick it up. And
Yep.
yeah, it's definitely something that I'm a little bit nostalgic for, and I wish there was like some way to recapture that on the streaming platforms.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like a weird next phase in technology that maybe it'll get figured out one day. I don't know. It's got to be hard to navigate even just as a new band, like trying
Mm-hmm.
to wade through all that stuff. I can't imagine how much more work people have to go through, like fighting the algorithms and all this other stuff to get on those platforms. I
Yep.
mean, I guess you could kind of talk about it. I mean, with your band Sacrificer, you guys are still kind of new. I mean, you've been around for a few years, but I
Yeah.
mean, like, maybe talk about that a little bit. Like,
Sure.
what's your experience been like trying to get this band going and getting that reach out there?
Sure. For the most part, I mean, in terms of like getting the band going and getting out there, we don't really put much effort into it. Jamie has been lately. Jamie pretty much runs the Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, and he's been like pushing our new release that came out at the end of December. Like
Yep.
he's pushing that a little bit, but for the most part, Sacrificer is just like, it's our outlet. He's in a band that has members kind of all over the United States,
Yeah.
and they tour a couple times a year, maybe.
Yeah.
um but when we started playing this music, it was just kind of like, we just wanted we just wanted to make music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We weren't really too worried about if anyone was listening to it or not. We just wanted to write some songs that we enjoyed. And I think you can kind of tell if you listen to like the progression of the material, because our first, we've put out 3 EPs,
Mhm.
and the first two sound very much like, they it's just like we were just writing whatever.
Yeah.
We didn't really have like any sort of focused goal or anything like that. We were just trying to write music, and we just kind of put it out there for anyone who might happen to stumble upon it and discover it. And then with the newer EP, we put more effort into it, and a lot of that happened because of the YouTube channel. Also,
Yeah.
just me doing music a lot more now. Those first 2 EPs, it was like, I was working a day job as a
Yeah, man.
distribution center manager. So, it wasn't music was definitely not a large portion of my life like it is now. And then with this last EP, I think the material came out a lot better. It's a lot more focused. Just, I don't know, just sounds like a band that's like taking itself a little bit more seriously, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
And that's probably why, Jamie's been pushing it a little bit harder, because maybe I've never talked to him about it, but I would imagine he probably feels better about it. He feels like,
Yeah.
he wants to get it out there. He's more proud of the performances, maybe. And that's kind of where it's at. Like, it's a band that we're definitely not um trying to go head first and tour or whatever like that. We just want to put out music that we like, and if it resonates with other people, cool. And if you want to see us on tour, sorry,
Yeah.
it's probably not gonna happen. But I mean, you never know. Who
There's
knows?
nothing
Who
wrong with
knows what
that though.
the
I
future
mean,
holds.
just
I think,
having like that outlet to have music out there, like you were saying, like not every band has to tour because I mean
mm,
that's a whole nother monster right there trying to make any money off touring right now.
yeah, and I
Fuck
just think
that.
the I wouldn't say the older you get, but I would say like the more responsibilities that you have in your life, when you start having like a mortgage and kids and all
Yeah.
these things, um, the gamble of going on tour becomes the risk is far greater than the reward. You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
for most bands, it's like if they come back and they made a little bit of money or they broke even, it's like that's a success, you know. But for a band that, I mean, myself personally, I have, a mortgage, I have kids, uh, responsibilities in my life. Coming back from a tour where I just spent 6 weeks out and I just broke even is like not a win. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
detrimental.
And
So
you're away from your family the whole time, and you're missing
yeah,
out on that time with them too, which is important.
it really is. And man, like, these guys that have been doing it forever, I have like so much respect, so much more respect now, especially when you see a band that's on tour and you're just like, these guys have been doing it for so long, and you know that they're away from their kids and their families and all that stuff for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and they're still just out there doing it. You know what I mean? So that you can come to the show and so that you can have a good time. It's like it's pretty inspiring
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. It's just like I said, I just have a deeper respect for it now than maybe I would have, prior.
Yeah, and I think from my little minimal time, like being on the road, like you lose out on a lot of friendships too, man. Because like people move on with their lives while you're gone, and it's like you come back and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, what have you been up to? It's like, oh, just working. Like, what have you been up to? And it's like there's two different. There's like this wide gap of like, you know, lifestyles here, and people don't really understand that aspect of it too.
Yeah, definitely the lifestyle of doing that. I mean, when when Jamie and I were in a band touring together, briefly, it it's definitely difficult to keep up with the people at home,
Yep.
and you're just doing it through like social media or whatever. And then you're back for like a couple weeks and it's like, oh, let me catch up with everyone real quick before I go again. And it's exhausting. And I could see doing that for years, how that would be really exhausting. And also kind of to in that same vein, I think that bands should just, I mean, I hate saying this, but I really think it's true. I think bands should just release less music. You know what I mean? Like take 2 years to write an album. This idea that we need to like constantly feed the machine and constantly release music and just constantly fuel the singer, people are just going to forget about you. It's like, I don't know, man. I would rather have a really great album from a band that's like refreshed and recharged because they took the time to go home and like really just decompress,
Yeah.
and then they really took the time to put in work on an album. Like I'd much rather listen to that than just like a band that just keeps spitting out albums so that they can keep touring. And I know that that's kind of the economy of it is like, well, we have to put out a new album because we need to keep touring because we need to pay our bills. But it's just like, I don't know. I wish there was a way for bands to just not have to do that, I guess.
No, I think you bring up an excellent point there, man. Because one thing I've noticed too when I'm like looking at like when records are released with bands, like there is sometimes a cadence. It's
Mm-hmm.
like every 2 years, here's a record.
Yep.
Every 2 years, or every year, or like now, just as an example, uh, look at Aborted, man.
Mm-hmm.
They do an album, then they do an EP, then they do an album, then they do an EP, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like every 2 years. That's like their little cycle. But I mean, it works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that's true. I'm sure there are bands that are they like get into a rhythm of doing things.
yeah,
And I guess I could see it from that end too, because it's like to the channel, when I'm writing music actively on channels for like demos or whatever, the
yep,
more I do it, the easier it gets, you know? But at the same time, like I think we've all listened to those bands where it's like they put out too much material closely, and then it's like, the albums just they aren't there's nothing special about the next release. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It sounds like sameish. It's just like, oh, this is just what you did, just not as good, you know? And I like I said, I know that exists. I know that the thing where it's like, oh, we need to album cycle, tour. It's like I know that exists, and
yeah.
yeah, I just wish there was a way. Content in general, whether it's like music or like YouTube videos, whatever it is. I feel like that's been the last 10 years or whatever is just like upload as much as you possibly can, put out as much music as you possibly can. But I think the caveat that most people are missing is like, well, do it as often as you can without like sacrificing the quality, you
Yep.
know. And the more people that I talk to about this, the more that I'm finding, like even for myself, is like people just appreciate it when you do less, but you put in more effort, and it's like good, you know.
No,
And
man, I that's kind of why I put the podcast on hiatus for a while, is because I got so fucking burnt out doing four or an episode a week, having to edit it, having to record it, having to look at all this information, read books, what you name it. It was a
mhm,
lot of work. And I'm working a 40-hour job at the same time.
yeah,
It's like there
that's
was
yeah,
no, and this was like kind of right when the pandemic hit. So it's like an extra like,
but yeah, an extra layer of bullshit that you got
oh
to
man.
deal with.
Yeah. So it was like, what? I just need
I
to take a
hear it.
step back from my own mental health because I'm not enjoying it. And if I'm not enjoying it, it's going to come off in the content. And I don't
Yeah,
want that.
totally.
Um,
Yeah.
and I hear that about people who do YouTube too, man. It's like they just do stuff all the time. And it's like, you got to edit the video, you got to record the video, you got to make sure the content's interesting. And like,
Yeah.
I can't, that's a whole nother beast that I'm about to get into myself. And I'm just like, am I going to be able to pull this off? you know?
It's you definitely can. I think that it's just it's like anything else, you know, it's just the more you do it, the better you get at it. And
Yep.
but it's there's for sure a similar thing going on there where especially now, you know, everyone's like the big trending topic on YouTube is people quitting YouTube right now.
Right.
And it's really interesting because it's like, well, why are all these people doing it? And I think kind of my observation of it is this isn't a lot of people will come, they'll say like, oh, I have the best job ever. I do YouTube and it's the best job ever, but it's like it's not a job, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's like a job is someplace that you go and you're employed by someone and you have benefits and you have paid time off and whatever else. Like, I mean, you can use the word job in a loose term to describe it, but that's not really what it is. It's more like it it's more of like a business, you know.
Yeah.
It's you are responsible for yourself and giving yourself time off and all those things. And I think what happens with people is they view it like a job. And I mean, any job I've ever been into, the lifespan for most people that get hired on is like 5 to 7 years, you know.
Yep.
And it just seems like that's kind of what's happening with YouTube also is these people come on, they're like 5 7 maybe 10 years in, whatever. Some of them are even deeper than that, and then they just get burnt out on the job, and then they want to like go try something else. And I think that like while it's perfectly healthy to want to do those things, you know what I mean, I think it's like a good thing for people to be like, hey, this isn't working out for me anymore, I need to step away. But I also think that a large part of that is because like a job, you're showing up and you're like, okay, I gotta every day, I gotta make a video every day, I gotta edit a video every day, I gotta, and then it just becomes not fun at some point, and it's just a
Yep.
job,
Yep.
you know. And the people that I've had several conversations with like other YouTubers and stuff about this, and when you talk to them and like the ones that are still like really passionate about it and have been doing it for a long time, it's because they have a lot of fun doing it. You know what I mean? They
Right.
find new things that maybe not even to appeal to their audiences or whatever it is. You know, they find new things to interest themselves and to keep themselves fresh in it. And yeah, so you know, I think that that could apply to music as well. If you started like on that
Oh
album
yeah.
cycle, just think about it like a job. It could be burnout big time.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that over the years. Like there are guys who are just like toured and toured and toured, and they're like, "Oh, I'm done. I can't do the band anymore. Like, I don't want to do this. This is not how I want to live my life." And then,
Mm-hmm.
new members come in, and
Yeah.
who do I always use some band. Oh, it's kind of a lame example, but I mean, if you look at like, for instance, Under Oath, like there's like one original member left in that band, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it's like, is it still Under Oath? The whole Ship of Theseus thing, like
Sure. I think that I mean
Suffocation.
you
There's
could
like
say
barely any members left in there,
yeah. It's you could say the same thing about I Declare War. I mean, Jamie's the only
right?
original member at this point. And
Yeah.
I know it's something that like I've talked about with him, but you know, if you think about the band as this like like I always think about bands as its own entity, right? It's
Mhm.
like you know, just like when you start a business. It's like if the if the owner of Dunkin' Donuts sells Dunkin' Donuts or becomes like an employee owned company, is it still Dunkin' Donuts? Like, yeah, it's still Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the same thing with bands too. Is it's like that that entity has evolved over time, and it's been beneficial to have contributions for all these people that have come in and out of it. But that's what's made it to this point, you know. And yeah, I see that argument a lot, and it's
Yeah.
like, and to me, it's kind of like, yeah, it's still the band. All those people were in it. You know, I like looking at those things on Wikipedia sometimes where you can see like the timelines of like and the overlap of
Yeah.
all the different people that have been in it, because it kind of illustrates an interesting picture for you of like how this band has shaped over the years, and like maybe you see overlaps of certain members and you can see
Yeah.
the stylistic influence of those members in the music. And I always find that very interesting. But you know, the only thing that's the only thing that's permanent is change, right? So
Right.
I don't think it's any different with bands.
And I mean, hey, it's always nice too when a band gets a member that kind of like refreshes them a little bit and like pushes
Yeah,
them in a different, direction.
totally.
Um, I mean, I think Cannibal getting Eric Rutan was the best thing that ever happened to them. I
Same.
mean, this is some of the best shit they've done in a long time, in
It,
my
it really
opinion.
is. And you can clearly see his influence too.
Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing with him though. He has such a distinct guitar playing style that when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's Eric Rutan.
Yep.
You know, even the way he records stuff, like you can kind of suss it out, like if you worked on an album, if you're just kind of used to hearing his stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the dude has a very distinct style, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Cannibal Corpse's material has certainly benefited from that as well.
Yeah,
And you know, there's another band. I mean, two original members, I think.
too. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, so
drummer and bass player.
right, Alex Webster.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, you know, you look at their progressions over the years. I mean, okay, point in case, right? Say what you like about Chris Barnes. Some people love him, some people hate him. It is what it
sure.
is. Uh, I'm a fan of like the first couple 6 Feet Under albums. I thought those were pretty cool. But when he left the band, which obviously like the band describes as like he just wasn't putting in the effort as the rest
Yeah,
of the band, right? So like you can kind of hear it. And then I believe Corpse Grinder's first album was was it Gallery of Suicide? I can't remember, but
yeah. I think it was that or the Wretched Spawn EP, maybe.
one of those,
No,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah,
that era. That's
yeah,
another band that was like album tour, album tour, album tour. Um, but you know, when I discovered them, I discovered Bloodthirst, which was like relatively early on in Corpse Grinder joining the band, and like that was my first real introduction to Cannibal Corpse. You know what I mean? So that's the sound I was familiar with, and then going back and listening to the older stuff, it was like, whoa, like you can hear the difference in between them having a vocalist that was like really engaged with the band and like really putting in the effort to like raise the bar of the band. You know, just
yeah,
like you were saying, it's like they benefited from that member change in a big way. And I think it's like so evident if you just listen to like the last Chris Barnes album and then like the first Corpse Grinder album. Big difference.
yeah. It's night and day. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
the
I
difference
think
between
probably
the
just
two.
for the band too, you know, the band being more motivated to write songs because they're like they have a vocalist that's more on board and pushing them harder, you know. It's like
Yeah,
iron sharpens iron, right? So,
yeah.
you know, really yeah, really just elevated that band for sure.
Let's get back to you, man. We've been talking so much about like other bands and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about your guitar.
Okay.
Your history with guitar. Like, when did you pick
Sure.
up guitar? How'd you start playing? All that.
Yeah. So like I said, it was pretty early on, man. I was very young, maybe like third or fourth grade or something like that. And
Wow.
I just remember I just remember being, well, maybe even earlier than that. When I was growing up, my grandmother was really infatuated with like Elvis. So,
Mhm.
you know, I grew up with like Elvis always being around, and I thought that was like pretty cool. But then as I like got older, um I got into Aerosmith. That was like the first band that I really like connected with. And it's just really like into the whole rock and roll thing, you know what I mean? The whole vibe. And so that's when I picked up the guitar, and then quickly went from that into like the grunge era, right? Which is
Yeah.
where I feel like most people really, my age definitely, um, picked up the guitar and started learning stuff because like Nirvana was super popular and they're very easy songs to learn.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what started the whole thing. And then I played guitar in I had a band in high school, like all the way through high school, and afterwards that was like a alternative rock band, I would say, and then started getting into metal more, started playing more metal. I've always been recording my own stuff. I was very, very early on in that.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I probably I start. It's gonna be so dated, but I started recording with the first release of Cakewalk Sonar, so
Okay.
like early 2000s, and I used that, and I used a drum program called Groove Shark, I think. It's something like that.
It
Something.
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was just a very like basic MIDI drum machine that you could like program loops with. And I didn't know anything about like programming drums, or I just wanted to be able to play guitar and like have it play back to me, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, Prior to that, I was just recording my guitar. I had a double tape deck. And so you could record guitar to like one tape and then put it in the other side and play back and then record that to the new tape with your guitar. So it would like be constant. I do 7 or 8 overdubs with
Oh,
guitar and just
wow.
make like random terrible guitar music. But yeah, so I've always been really, really into recording myself. I've always been really into making music. And then yeah, just started getting into metal, just kept, the recording served me for like being able to come up with ideas and share those with my band members. And that's what I did forever. It was just like I wasn't really recording seriously. Maybe like recorded some bands here and there or whatever.
Yep.
But mostly like it was just a tool for me to like create things, and then it became like a writing tool for working on stuff with bands that I was in, and then over time that's just like kind of progressed into YouTube now, and kind of what happened there was just I'd been in bands. I was in a band that like toured pretty heavily for a couple years, and that definitely wasn't for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then I joined this band like with Jamie, and we just kind of like started making music together. And then I just kind of realized at some point I'm like, I really benefit greatly from doing something that's creative,
Mhm.
but I don't really see any money being made by anyone in this area of music. Like it just is not. It's kind of like a lifestyle thing almost, where it's like if this is your thing and you're about it, then like you just figure out a way to make it work. And while that's, I respect that and I think that's very cool. Um, I have kids,
Yeah.
I have a wife, I have a mortgage, I have responsibilities. So that just wasn't an option. It's not, and I like I man, I hate showing up to my day job. I'm just gonna bail on this and start touring again full time. That wasn't really an option. So I kind of started thinking about like YouTube. I'm like, well, I
Yeah.
know like people do that. Like that's obviously the thing that people make money with, and it's I could play guitar more. So let me try and figure that out. And then that's kind of how I got into YouTube, and yeah, that's where I've been since.
It's kind of a weird set of coincidences how I found you. So I remember the last time I had Jamie on, he mentioned having a band, but he didn't tell me the name of it yet. He was like, "Yeah, I got this new band that I'm working on, but we don't know what's going on with it."
Hmm.
So it's probably when he was starting working on music with you.
Hmm.
And then around 2 years ago, I think, maybe a year ago,
Hmm.
I was really struggling with like writing guitar stuff because like I don't ever get full song ideas in my head. It's just like riffs at a time. And I was like,
Sure.
how the fuck can I like write stuff like this? And one of your videos popped up about like just writing one riff at a time, recording it,
Hmm.
saving it, coming back to it later. And I was like, holy shit, that's such a good idea. And then during all that, I was like looking through your stuff and I saw that you had the band Sacrificer, and I was like, wait, that's Jamie. Like I how the fuck like
Yeah,
this is the band that he was talking about.
full circle.
So yeah, man, it's that's just what happens sometimes in my life. But yeah, that's why I reached out to you too. I was like, well, if I'm gonna bring this back and do this again, like I would like to, talk to somebody that isn't necessarily touring, but they're still doing music. They're still involved in the metal scene and like just a completely different avenue.
Yeah, and I mean, look, everyone is gonna do music in their own way. They all have their own courses for sure, but this is just the one that kind of worked out for me, and it keeps me involved with music, um, in a way that's like, it keeps me playing guitar. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I would go to my day job and work like 10, 12 hours or whatever, and I would be thinking about playing guitar. I'm like, man, I just want to go play guitar. I just want to go write something. I just want to record something, like if I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to like listen to the music I wanted to listen to at work, um, it would just feel that even more, and I'd be like, oh, I just
Yeah.
want to like I just felt this itch to write something. And then just to go home and it's like, you know, see my family and stuff and just not really have time to do that. And it kind of drove me crazy for a while. And then yeah, I just realized I was like, I can write music and like make YouTube videos. And I think that scratches the itch. I think I'll be okay with that. I do really enjoy playing live still. Like
Mhm.
it's very fun, but it's like if it's something that I really wanted to do more, um, all the guys in Sacrificer are cool with playing shows. We could play more shows, if we
Yeah.
wanted to. But I kind of like this. I kind of like being able to have these different avenues for creativity, like when I want to. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
we have the band, we can release material, we can play shows, we can whatever, or I could just like work on material on my YouTube channel, and you know, those kind of feed each other a little bit. A lot of the songs that end up being Sacrificer songs usually start out as like gear demos on my YouTube
Right.
channel. So, but it is something I'm focused on a lot more this year. Like I just started, which is hilarious that I've never done this, but I just started releasing like these songs that I write on my YouTube channel. I'm starting to like, release them on Spotify, Apple
Yeah.
Music, whatever. Um, and I think that's something that like I'm really pushing myself to do this year is like not only write music at the same rate that I had been before, but actually like releasing it,
Mhm.
and then like closing the books on it and like, hey, that's, you know, that demo song for whatever thing I made it for is like out there in the world now. Like people can actually listen to it. Because I get that a lot, people asking like, hey, that song's really cool. What's it from? And it's like this.
Yeah.
I literally just wrote it for this pedal.
I mean, it's cool too. Like if it does eventually become a song, like like you said, having that early version of it out there is pretty rad to go back and listen to and be like, oh shit, yeah, that's pretty close to the end product.
Yeah, definitely. Those ideas do turn into sacrificer songs more often than not. But I went through this thing. I actually like live streamed it the other day because I was like, maybe people want to watch me doing this. But I went through all my old projects, and I have something like 50 or 60 unreleased songs that are like
Wow.
they're like demo songs. They're like a
Yeah.
minute and a half or 2 minutes long, which I feel like is fine for guitar music, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 50 or 60 of them just like sitting there not doing anything, and I'm just like, I need to like start consolidating these things and getting these things out. So I started that process like last weekend, like really
Oh wow.
yeah, like the end. It took me like a couple days to actually get through that many projects and figure out what's what and kind of organize it. But now that it's organized, I can start like releasing them. So, probably like release a couple songs a week for a while till I have, some songs out there again.
So so your channel also is like very gear focused.
Mhm.
And that's something I don't really, weirdly enough, like hear a lot in the metal community unless they're like a shred kind of guitar player.
Yeah.
Then those guys are all about gear. So what kind of got you fascinated into the gear aspect of everything?
Really, okay, so you know, there's a couple things. The
Mhm.
first is that the first and foremost is uh gear demos and stuff is kind of what pay the bills.
Right.
It's the things that people are going to be most interested in is when new gear comes out. They want to see the thing, especially if they vibe with like a certain personality and a certain type of guitar player, certain
Yeah.
style, whatever. They want your take on it, you know. They want to hear you play through it, and they kind of want your opinion on it. So, um, so that's kind of yeah, that's kind of like the first and foremost thing. And that also gives me an opportunity as well to like when I'm making those videos to get songs out there too, you know, because
Yeah.
like I can demo whatever song I wrote through the piece of gear. So that's kind of like what started the gear stuff. I think like the first video that I ever got that had any sort of like traction where I saw like, oh, maybe this is what I should do with my channel was a gear video. It was like a new piece of gear that I had bought that I just randomly kind of became interested in. My channel actually started out as like I was trying to do like covers,
Mhm.
like metal covers of like not metal songs. Like that's
Yeah.
the first couple things that I did, and it was just like, you know, it's like anything when you started, you're just kind of like yelling out into the void, you know, and no one's paying attention. But the gear thing is like kind of what started that, and then it made me realize like, oh, that's like the economy of like YouTube is like gear reviews and you know things that people like want to pay to get in front of other people. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's like sort of the cornerstone, probably not only my channel, but I would imagine most guitarists channels that like do this as their primary source of income.
Yeah.
Um, it's probably they probably do a lot of gear stuff, and then beyond that, there are things that I do that like are not you know motivated financially that are gear related just because I think they're interesting. Like I'll go buy a really old amplifier that has, you know, not really any coverage on YouTube because why would it? You know, like
Right.
the old 90s death metal amplifiers that everyone used. Um I did a video on the Line 6 Veda 2 just because like I always wanted one and I always thought it was super cool and I just thought, you know, that's like something like I said, you know, before, sometimes you have to do things for yourself
Yeah.
to keep yourself like to keep it interesting and to keep it fun for yourself and hopefully other people enjoy the things that bring you enjoyment as well. That's kind of like what those things were, you know, they're just my morbid curiosities like, oh, I want this piece of gear for like the aesthetic reasons or whatever it is and I just want to test it and I never got the opportunity to back in, you know, the 2010s or whenever that piece of gear came out. And yeah, so those are like the two gear things that I've done on my channel, if I answered your
I
question.
I know like as far as recent stuff you've done, man, those two like really shitty cheap guitars that you got, that was some pretty entertaining stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks.
I I mean, I cannot believe. I mean, I can because you know it's that cheap, but you know, you expect a little bit of craftsmanship in there and like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I and I also appreciate your honesty too with like the Timu one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just insane to me. Like,
Yeah, it's
man, that guitar is a piece of shit.
yeah, and it's and you know I feel bad because like the guitar is not the most horrible thing I've ever played, and I
Hmm.
tried to like be honest about it. Like the cool thing about those videos, like the Amazon one, and then you know what the Timu one ended up being
Yeah.
was when like let's say you take a sponsorship with someone, right? And this is like a misconception that I think people have about YouTube videos. People
Right.
will think, well, because something's sponsored, you're just like lying and propping it up, and it's like, no, it's not really that. But you also don't want to like take money from someone and then be like bad mouthing them, you know?
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense. And I think like the ethical way to deal with that most of the time is that if you have a sponsored video and the thing just totally fucking sucks, and like the person especially if they're like, oh, we want you to say these things about it. Like sometimes they'll give you bullet points or whatever. And like you
Hmm.
don't agree with those. I think it's just best to be like, hey, this isn't going to work out. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Hey, this video is not going to work out. And then in that case, people never see those videos, you know? But when it came to like the Timu thing and they wanted to sponsor a video and then they sent me stuff and I did it. And then like I'm done editing it. I know this is something like a topic that people are going to have interest in just based off of the video that I had done previously on like the Amazon guitar, which wasn't
Yep.
a sponsored video, you know, and I could get the guitar and be like, hey, this is cool. This sucks. Like, you know, no, no need to contact the sponsor and be like, hey, this thing's not working out for me. Um, I knew with the Timu video that's like, it was something people were going to be interested in, and I had already done all this work, but it's like, there's a big ethical problem that I have with
Yeah.
this. You know what I mean? And I was actually like mortified to release that video. Like I had like knots in my stomach about it because I was just like, oh, like I don't want to be in the middle of this, I don't want to be in the middle of drama or whatever. But to my surprise, um, like kind of the reception has been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of thought like, I mean, I get a little bit of friction on it, maybe people that are like, it's typically the things that I already addressed, like people saying, oh, well, you know, we live in a capitalist society. So, like, these problems are going to exist in any part of and it's like, yeah, that's true. But
That's not the
also,
point.
there, there's not like several articles and investigations going on with the government specific to these conditions that I brought up. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, it is what it is. I released it, and I feel like most people get what I was trying to say, which is like, I couldn't take their money. I still wanted to show you this video because I thought it was entertaining and valuable to you,
Right.
maybe.
I
But
agree, man. That's how I took it too. I was like, well, I appreciate the candid honesty there and like the way you presented it. It was
thanks,
entertaining and honest.
thanks, man. I appreciate it. I actually like, I shot the whole monologue portion of that like 3 times. I kept rewriting it, kept redoing it because I'm like, I just want to be like clear here, and I just want to make sure people understand that it's like, I'm not just trying to like bash Timu to get views or something like that.
Right.
Like, it's not where I'm coming from. I just like, the video's done. I think you'll enjoy it. Let me just be clear about what's happening. So
Yeah. Yeah. And ethical concerns aside, like, it's clearly subpar product,
yeah,
and if people haven't picked up on that by now, that's kind of on them. Like, you can't,
yeah, and it's look, all of these. I mean, even Amazon,
yeah,
any
it's
of
getting
these,
worse.
um, their website. It's like these websites aren't making anything. They're just selling other people's things, and they have to do it at such a low cost that it's like the thing you're gonna get is probably not going to be that great.
Hmm.
And there are like gems out there, like the Amazon guitar that I did. I honestly feel like that was a really great guitar, but it just had this like one glaring problem with it that was like made it unplayable for me. It was just like the neck bent. I mean, and you can bend a neck by pushing on it. Typically, like, you
Yeah.
can detune it half a step or something like that. Not a crazy amount, but this thing was just like, without much effort, it was, going down a step and a half or something like that, out of tune. And it was like, wow, this is like a little bit too much. Like, it makes me feel uncomfortable a little bit.
Yeah, that's pretty
Um,
bad.
but everything else was really good. It's like, so what do you say about that guitar? You're like, it's awesome, but
You have to tune it all the
yeah,
time.
this is kind of one big problem. So
Yeah.
uh, I think that those videos, those are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Those videos are a lot of fun for me to do because it's like, again, just back to this thing, there's no uh it's like it's like almost they're videos that I'm just making for to entertain people rather than like showing a specific piece of gear, because I know that, like, and like you said, most people know that the stuff you're going to get from these places is probably not going to be that great.
Yep.
But when you can make a video about it and you can show those points in an entertaining way, or even say like, hey, these are actually, I was surprised, like, this was really cool, this was good about it, uh it just makes the whole thing a lot more fun,
Yeah.
so yeah, I like doing those. I'm probably going to do more of those videos.
Oh, dude, you should go to Walmart and buy like one of their like,
I know, yeah, that's a good point,
$80 guitars or something.
dude. So I did just order one from Wish. uh
Oh, okay.
yeah, and before I did, I actually looked up like Wish to see if there was like any connection to Timu and like the legal things that they have going on. And there wasn't. Nothing came up, so I was like, okay, I can do this
That's
one.
good.
And and they just have like the most terrible ads. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen those things pop up, or they were very popular like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but they were just like pushing ads hard, and it's like the ads that would come up were just for the most random weird things. I think Jamie actually made if I'm not mistaken, Jamie made an Instagram account just posting all of the weird ads he was getting from Wish. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, hilarious because it's just like nothing but pictures of these ads of like, there's like a dental dam thing, like this woman with just her mouth open and like just all these weird contraptions where you're like, what is this thing? And why are you advertising this to me? So,
Yeah,
uh,
who's gonna buy this?
yeah, so interested to get a guitar from whoever's selling guitars on their platform and see what that's like. I don't have high expectations, but you never know. Maybe we'll get surprised.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
Mhm.
So let's kind of close out with you recently just went to NAM. I saw your video went up earlier. I'm gonna check it out later. But if you want to just kind of, you know, give me a little bit about what you did at NAM, maybe stuff
Sure,
that's not in the video, your how what you did, your experience with it. I love
sure,
watching NAM stuff.
sure. Um, yeah, NAM's really cool. NAM is very overwhelming for me because it's just there's a lot of people there. There's a lot. It's
Yeah.
almost like there's too much, you know. Um, I think that I learned that I would really benefit from it if I because I don't when I go to NAM I don't stay. My family lives in Southern California, so I stay with them. And it's like not super near Anaheim, I mean, it's probably like
Yep.
an hour commute in. And I just learned that I would probably benefit like staying right there at NAM and being able to like be there super early and get more time in there because I feel like by the time I like wake up and get going for the day and then get down there, it's already like 11 o'clock, noon, something like that. And then I've missed out on half the day. And then I got to like cram everything into these few hours that you have left. And there's just so much to see. There's
Yeah.
so much to see. And on top of that, the main thing that I really like about NAM and the main reason that I go and kind of what makes me like a terrible content creator when it comes to NAM is I just like seeing people. I just like seeing people that I like don't get to see, people that I only exchange emails with or like Instagram messages or whatever, like getting to
Mhm.
see them in person and just like, you know, give them hugs and tell them like, I'm glad you exist.
Yeah.
glad you're here. And that's I get more what about this? I get more involved doing that and just like socializing, I guess, than I do in like content creation. So I made a very like conscious decision this time. I'm like, I'm gonna bring a camera on a gimbal. Like I'm gonna try and film as much of this as I can. And even with that mindset, I still feel like I missed out on a lot of it. Like especially like going and seeing new gear, which is what I probably should be doing while I'm there, right? But
I mean, yeah,
yeah, it's
but
just it's the
you
least
also have
appealing.
to enjoy it too.
Yeah, exactly. It's the least appealing part to me. Is like
Yeah.
what new pedals are coming out, and what's Ibanez's new line of guitars. Like I know that's what people want to see, and that's what I
Mhm.
should be doing. But yeah, for me, I just like I said, I just the important part to me is like socializing and seeing people and being able to talk to them. So when I was there, I played at a couple booths. I played at the Deviant Guitars booth on Friday. Deviant Guitars is run by my friend Royce, and he's the one who designed the Grim War. Like we designed it together. He made it.
Nice.
Guitar play on my channel a lot. And then the second day, I played at the IK. I did like a demo, like a live demo, and I don't know, conversation, I guess. This is a new
Mhm.
thing for me, so I don't know what to call it. But I did this like live demo at the IK multimedia booth of Tonex, the
Okay.
their like capturing software. And that was really cool. I just got to play through some songs and like show some examples and talk about Tonex a little bit. So really like working with those guys. They're great. And then that was kind of like my obligations, I guess I would say at NAM. Like
Yeah.
those are the things that I plan on doing. But the rest of the time was just wandering around. I got to see the new Lichtlarum amplifier, which I've been really, really excited about. It's my friend Daniel who makes those pedals, and now he's made this new amplifier. So hopefully, I get an opportunity to put that on the channel soon and show that to people because it's like something I'm personally very excited about and very into. So that'll be a lot of fun to make that. And then, um, yeah, I don't made contact with like people that I talked to from different companies. I got to hang out with Ola, and I got to hang out with our mutual friend Stefan Killerman, who does
Hell
the
yeah.
boutique amp distribution stuff. We all hung out, went to dinner, and then my friend Simon from Nightmare, and he was there with his podcast partner Hano. Um, so we all just kind of like palled around and went out to dinner and got to have like some good conversations with those people. And to me, that's kind of like what NAMM is about. It's like good
Yeah.
conversations with good people that I don't see that often.
Yeah, I can imagine like being one of those guys that has to just play all day there.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the
Yeah,
booths and everything. Like, man.
yeah. It's I mean, I was at these booths for maybe 20 minutes, but just knowing that like I have to be at this booth, you don't want to wander too far from it because
Mhm.
it's massive. Like this, uh, even this year compared to last year, it was just huge. It was so much bigger this year, and those are my only two experiences. So people that had been prior were like not surprised by this,
Yeah.
like I was. But just knowing, like, if I walk too far from here, I'm gonna have to power walk all the way back. So, um, yeah. But like every year I go, I feel like I get a little bit better at like checking things out and like trying to make content or whatever. But yeah, it's just hard to change those mindsets, from
Yeah.
like a socializing mindset to a making content mindset.
I mean, it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of stuff going on, and you have to enjoy it as well as like, the content aspect of it. But
Yeah.
seems like you did good. Sounds like
Yeah.
you had a blast.
Yeah, I did okay. It was fun. It was a good time.
Well, Taylor, lay it out there, man. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Check out your content. Obviously, I'll put all that stuff on our show notes and everything. But from
Cool.
from the word of your mouth.
Yeah, yeah. YouTube, that's the main place. Instagram, both my name, Taylor
Mhm.
Danley, pretty easy to find. Now Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your
Yep.
music platform is, I'm uploading the songs there. So if you just like the songs you hear in the demos and want to listen to, you know, a playlist with those songs in it, you could do that. Again, Taylor Danley, my band Sacrificer with Jamie, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever. And I'm sure I'm leaving other things out, but those are the main ones I feel like.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, man, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. Yeah, it's good to be back doing this, and you're my first guest back, man. So thank you, dude.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
really like honored to be the first guest.